Alright, the Scandinavian comes off the first move, pawn to e4, and if you're an e4 player yourself, then definitely you need to know how to handle the Scandinavian. So, what's the point of playing this move, pawn to d5? By the way, I'll go real slow, explaining every move in details, because I want that you understand it. You don't have to memorize variations, but you just understand all the right ideas, plans, and how to play it, both as white or as black, okay? So, why should black play pawn to d5 on the first move? Well, let's come back to the first, fundamental ideas about the opening. In an opening, you want to develop your pieces and fight for the center.
And d5 helps you to achieve both of these goals. You do fight for the center, and you occupy one central square yourself, and on top of that, you open up this diagonal for your bishop and this line for your queen. Therefore, it's kind of an ideal move that fits all the criteria that you wish from your move. To push it back to its original square, possibly, or
Press the word to e2 where it still stands. White tries to insist on being active and tries to go forward. This can easily backfire, because after e5 you kind of lock the door, and this knight has no way out, or bishop also takes away this square, so in the next move you're ready to play c6, and, while suffer from horsing around for so long. There is another sideline worth mentioning, is the move knight to f3, which looks absurd at first. Not only you blunder this pawn, but from there it's gonna attack the knight. But it's worth mentioning this move, because it actually is the beginning of the so-called Tennyson Gambit. And in the main line, what wins real quickly, of course, it's a tricky opening. If black plays correctly, they can easily stay away from this. But a lot of shameless YouTubers recommended this line for white, myself included, and so you gotta know this little variation. So after pawn takes, white goes knight g5, aiming to get it back, as black defends it, white then continues with pawn to d3, attacking this pawn twice, black happily trades off, and now white hopes for black to play a natural move pawn h6, which is a big blunder that loses the game. Now, spoiler, you just gotta play any other virtually move here for black, such as knight to c6, and you're a pawn up, and very good. But if black goes pawn to h6, that fails to knight takes f7. Quite a strange combo. King takes, and now bishop to g6. This is a check to the king as well as the scour attack for his queen. And thanks to these tactics, white manages to grab her queen, expose her king, and to win the game. But again, as I mentioned earlier, really easy to stay away from this if you just know this trap. All in all, we've got two main options of white, pawn takes d5 or pawn goes for e5, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. Pawn takes d5 is the main move, but on amateur level, pawn e5, which is not good objectively, surprisingly popular. So let's talk about it first. And before, the problem with white going pawn e5 is that it actually doesn't give much to white. Because now you've got a pawn in the center, your opponent's got a pawn in the center, nothing changed besides that, so that really does not give white any advantage. There is a little upside that it takes away this natural square from your knight. Therefore it can't develop it easily, but there's also a downside, because this pawn is now far away from the rest of the white's army, and therefore it means that you can possibly try to target this weak pawn. You can do this by going pawn to c5 first to take away this square so that white can't easily go d4 and support it. Now if they go d4 you'll always be able to just capture the pawn and eliminate it completely. If they ever try to bring the knight out, you can always pin it so that the knight doesn't do anything. And also if you want, you'll be able to capture it anytime you want. Play, let's say, visualize the pin, you then bring the knight out to c6, and now notice that it's already quite difficult for white to defend this pawn. You want to trade off the knight and capture the pawn.
So if they castle or do whatever, you do just that. Trade. Knight takes e5. Now you're pawn up. If you want to, you can trade off the bishop next. And objectively speaking, this is a technically winning position for black already. Now what if you can't capture this pawn for whatever reason? Let's say they somehow manage to defend it. Doesn't really matter. Your position is still good, even if it's not completely winning. But you just continue playing, say they do something. For example, I select the place, or e6, for example, they want to play something like this again. For some reason, listen, they cannot take this pawn. You'll just develop normally, and in all these variations, you got some person mark defense, and much more to defense, because the first time it's good, From here we also set up this battery against the each opponent if your opponent is careless, such as in this game.
He played b5, and actually it was a blunder. So far we've been talking about the classical line, and it is definitely good and playable. You can use just that and you'll be perfectly fine. But let me also add a more sophisticated way of playing the Scandinavian defense, which I personally enjoy the most. Instead of bringing a queen out, which allows your opponent to go knight to c3 and gain a tempo, and somewhat get a more active position, you can try to neutralize this only drawback of the Scandinavian defense by playing knight f6 and going after this pawn with your knight. Then the Scandinavian defense has no drawbacks at all, because you destroyed your opponent's center. You also bring your knight out, you centralize the knight, which is a good thing to do, and it's really a win for you all around. So, what will your opponent do? Quite often they'll be confused, they'll just play some trivial, development move, which doesn't do anything, and after that you happily get the pawn back, notice that your knight is defended, and you just have no problems. After that you develop as usual, like this, have no problems. Moreover, most of your opponents here will actually take on d5, which is another error, because this time queen stands pretty well on d5. Your opponent simply does not have this knight that could possibly jump to c3 and hit your queen, and so the queen is very comfortable here. After that, again, you're going to go with, bishop g4, knight c6, maybe castle queenside e5, and you see that you even are obtaining a more active position, so clearly you have no problems here. Now is already time for white to start being a little bit worried about their safety. A little bit of a downside of the move knight f6 is that sometimes it can become more complicated. For example, if white gets greedy and says, hey, you know what, I'm not going to give you this pawn back, I'm playing c4, you ain't going to get it back. Then the variations after that are more complicated, but I still like them, because you play e6. After this trade, yes, white is up pawn, but you are much more active. Notice that you've got two pieces in the game and white is still completely passive. Plus one has some weaknesses in this backward pawn, which gives you a lot of attacking options. Now, again, the variations are complicated. I'll drop a link below to another video where I analyzed in more details if you're interested, but for now let me just show you one of the main lines so that you have a taste of this opening. Let's say white goes d4, which looks really good. Maybe he's ready to push forward. If angle bishop b4, check to the king. White wants to cover, but then you go knight e4. This time, you still capitalize on the pin and you attack the knight once again.
White plays another natural move, bishop d2, and all of a sudden it turns out that it was already a blunder, because now queen takes d4 is possible. Notice that because of this bishop, the white queen no longer defended the pawn on d4 and you could just grab it. You also now put pressure all around, with all of your pieces. The queen defends this knight, and if white pulls to gain a temple to attack your queen, as they often do it in the Scandinavian defense in the main line, by knight f3, all of a sudden is checkmated one with queen takes f2, and there are thousands of games where white blundered this exact checkmate, which just goes to show how dangerous this variation